And we're live here on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. Hey, everybody. Pete Paschal here, the Media Co-Pilot. I am speaking this fine Friday post-Halloween morning with Jackson Wightman. Hello, Jackson.
Hey, Pete. How are you?
Cool. Jackson, as you may know, but if you don't, he's the Minister of Proper Propaganda, which is a PR firm in Montreal, Canada. He's also the author of the Tech PR Playbook. He also happens to be one of the first clients of the Media Co-Pilot, if you can believe that. But that was like way back in January, right?
It was. In AI terms, that's like 7 dog years away, right?
It's
like,
insane. Yeah. Well, we had a great session. It was awesome to meet your team, sort of show them the ropes of AI, at least what AI was in January 2024. I feel like it's totally different. Like that session obviously was a template that I've evolved a lot over time. But I'd love to sort of probe sort of where you're at with AI. First of all, what did that unlock for you guys? And I'm super curious, like how you've sort of run with the ball there after seeing sort of like, getting a level up with sort of the basics and some purpose-built kind of scenarios for PR.
Yeah, look, I think we came to the training with a view towards, and I think this is a fairly common view in our industry, AI touches almost every single part of PR work. So regardless of, outside of strategy, and obviously AI can even help with ideation, we knew before we talked to you and your team, that this was going to be a huge impact in our industry, the same way it is for journalism. And I know you publish a lot of content about journalism. So we were coming from the perspective of, you know what, we don't know a hell of a lot, but we're pretty sure almost every function, almost every element of the job is going to be touched by this. Obviously, we came and we had those moments that I think a lot of people have when they first get exposed to AI, those holy cow moments, like this has done something so quickly. Mm-hmm. This is going to, we're going to reap all these sort of benefits of efficiency. And then I think as our experience evolved, we kind of realized what a lot of people realize, that the output of this, if it's not very carefully managed, can be quite problematic and quite poor. It's got that kind of, I think it was Clayton Christensen who said, it's got that low cost, low quality thing to it. Obviously that's changing. I think that's changed a lot since we first talked in January, but that's where we were coming from. And I think that's been our journey to date. And I think we've, in the process, like, where are we now? Where are we at right now? Now we're thinking about some of the maybe more mature questions, the sort of later evolved questions that are more around business impact and more around things that are more directly tied to how our firm does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely, I remember, showing you guys some stuff with ChatGPT, and I think for January, February this year, I could sort of lean on the simple mind-blowingness of what it could do. And just sort of getting people's heads around it was a thing. And now I think everyone sort of gets it. Like, okay, AI does sort of human-like stuff. We get it, but what can it do for me? And, in the months since, and I'm sure you've sort of explored this too, is that, even just sort of thinking about AI, it clearly levels up anyone who might be a novice at something to something passable, and again, with caveat, you have to check the work, obviously. Out of the box, it probably has less to offer a professional who wants something great, right? And that's where sort of the techniques and the sort of specialized nature of whatever tools you're using sort of really come into play. Um, and before we get into the business impact, I'd love to just sort of probe with you, like, where have you found that AI can be applied and to find sort of, I guess, the lowest hanging fruit? Like, where is it like right away? Oh, yeah, obviously, let's do AI for X or Y in a PR comms scenario,
Yeah.
and let's at least do that, and then we'll get into sort of more complex stuff later.
I think there's a couple of realms, and I'm going to be very specific to a couple of very PR specific things. So
Please.
we used to spend, I mean, we even prided ourselves upon this. This was something I would say to clients in sales calls. We would spend inordinate amounts of time researching media targets, influencer targets. That is something that AI can do very, very well. And indeed, a number of the kind of more popular platforms and pieces of software that PR firms would use, whether it's like a Muckrack or a Brandwatch, have those tools now very baked into them. So there's very impressive AI baked into it. That's something that I think targeting is a very big part of PR, particularly any PR around outreach, maybe not around crisis comms. That's an area where it's like, wow, this is making a huge difference here. Uh,
Mhm.
Ideation, certain types of ideation, not big picture strategy, because I think that will always be, at least for now, that seems to be the moat of humans. And I think a lot of if you're running an agency, a lot of people are paying you for those big picture ideas and for the experience you can bring as an outsider. And right now, AI can't replicate that. But if you need ideas around, hey, what's our subject line for this pitch? AI is
Mhm.
wonderful at that. And we're talking about a range of tools that can do that. Cloud can do that. Perplexity can do that. ChatGPT can do that. It's something that I think is essential. Certain types of written content, it's very good for. A tool you introduced us to in our training that we still use for certain types of things, phrase. I mean, I think phrase is
Mhm.
something that works very well for what it does for search optimized content and for kind of figuring out, okay, we're going to produce this content. Will it work? There were ways pre AI that we could go about doing that. I think post AI, you can be more certain about what is going to land with a specific audience, and more certain of how to kind of optimize it for various things that you might want to see happen. So those are definitely obvious ways. Targeting certain types of content production, certain types of ideation. I think there's a few others on the reporting side, and I think reporting is
Mhm.
always important to clients in PR in particular. They want to see where they stand. Sentiment analysis with AI for me is wonderful. I think it's
Mm.
a lot more. Are there problems? Sure. Do things get categorized a certain way? Sure. There's an obtuse nature to any sentiment analysis, to looking at an article and saying, hey, this is positive, neutral, or negative. Okay, well, there's gray in between those words, obviously.
Mhm.
But I think sentiment analysis is a pretty good thing in terms of leveraging AI and PR. And then for me, maybe the final thing is other elements of reporting that an agency would do can be very streamlined with AIs. That's
I'm
how
curious.
we're looking
Yeah.
at it.
I'm curious if you use the data analysis as part of your AI workflow. I find that's a thing I've really evolved since I had our session with you guys, in that
Yeah.
I've really sort of streamlined and made more sophisticated what you can do with these tools, whether it's ChatGPT or something more specific, to
Mm,
really, like, give it some data and please
yeah.
extract some insights for me, because I
Yeah.
feel like that's such an underutilized thing when people sort of first start using these tools.
I mean, for me, it's one of the biggest advantages of AI. And I think it's a lot of the work we do in PR requires that,
Hmm.
requires taking a big chunk of information and attempting to extrapolate something from it. So it's certainly something we're doing. And I think it's something that, a lot of professional service firms, a lot of people who are selling knowledge, whether it's PR or something else, it's something you can do very, very quickly with AI. Again, with caveats and human oversight, like we always say. But
Exactly.
for us, yeah, data analysis is very good. Um, it's definitely baked into how we do things now.
Nice. So let's get back to that business impact point you made. So it's like you're doing all this interesting stuff with AI. You're doing it for some content, data analysis. the research on media, and how do you just broadly overall think about its impact? Is there ways you measure it, either qualitative or quantitative? It sort of speaks to even just how you think about AI, right? Because
Yeah.
it's rapidly becoming not just a sort of like a separate thing. It's kind of getting embedded in everything. So,
Yeah.
how do you think about that, and how do you measure the impact?
It's a great question, and it's one that I don't think we've fully answered yet. But one of the things, I mean, I'll tell kind of a story. After we did that training with you, one of the things that we sat down, the leadership at our firm sat down and said, okay, these guys have shown us how we can do tasks A, B, C, and D. Let's track the time we spend on those tasks. We knew what we were spending before on say, building a media list. Okay,
Mm,
well, we did it a certain way. Now we're going to use a range of these tools that are available to us. How much does it come down? And I was thinking in some cases that we would reduce the time spent on specific task somewhere by between 5 and 10x. So if it took 10 minutes, it was going to take 2 minutes or something. And
nice.
and that was generally like that was I don't know if that was right everywhere, but that was generally what we were seeing was great reductions in tasks. Some service offerings, this carried over to some service offerings. One of the things we do is what we call brand narrative work. So sorting out the words of a brand, helping them sort out their written story, if you will, not visual stuff, but written stuff. That service we would normally need to kind of complete the classic deliverables. We would need 60 to 65 hours, and there would be a lot of things involved in that. I mean, this is something that has come down remarkably. And so there's been a huge profitability increase in some services. Is that
Mm,
going to carry on forever? Are people going to tolerate paying the price that they paid in 2022 in 2026? Probably they're not. Probably they're going to clue into the
mm.
fact that, hey, most of the PR firms, if they have a brain in their head or if they're even still alive, are using these tools and greatly reduce things. So we looked at time reduction on tasks, and we had a bucket of tasks, and we were fairly systematic about that analysis, and it was I think as good or better than we thought in most cases. We
Mm,
also looked at and this is a lot less exact, but these were questions we asked. Um, Theoretically, some of the tasks AI does, I think, and maybe this is just my own understanding of it, but I think it's widely presumed that you're going to be able to reduce tasks that are sometimes considered boring or mundane for certain
sure.
people. So you should see higher satisfaction levels out of staff. You should be able in PR, I mean, the typical cost structure is 55% of revenue is allocated to salaries.
Hmm.
So that's a lot, right? Like that's
Mm.
a huge amount of money. The model typically in PR is you want to see 55% for people, 25% for overhead, and have 20% profit at the end of the day. And I'm being a bit obtuse with that, but
Yeah, no, but it's totally the people's always the
the big
biggest
thing,
cost.
right?
Yeah.
So are you able to run a firm that's doing $2 or $3 million at a relatively higher profit because you can have people doing more work? Like that's something that we haven't fully seen
Mm,
that bear out yet. And maybe it's going to, but I think we want to look at time reduction. We want to look at satisfaction of the humans, particularly those who are on the more mundane stuff. And then we want to look at profitability and the efficiency of the firm. And for me, and it's just our firm, I can only speak for my firm. We're not there yet on the third
mhm.
piece, but it
Right.
seems on the first two, we're seeing what we might hope to see a little bit.
Yeah, it's like you're not going to see sort of the instant, I guess, fill of the pipeline as AI sort of percolates, because it's like you have to. It sounds like you've been thorough about it. That you've done, you've experimented, you've done your analysis on that. You're starting to apply it in more systematic ways, and it's going to take time for all of that to sort of essentially show up on the bottom line, because the bottom line is the bottom line.
Yeah.
And I think everything you're saying about freeing up time, and getting AI to handle the road tasks certainly resonates. But I think the big question is, does that then allow you to take on more clients and more work that is going to fuel the growth of what you're doing? And it's if you've only just sort of done some systematic stuff, and that's probably going to take a little while to know that answer.
Yeah, and I only bring it up because I think that most people, and these are agency owners, they're thinking about that. I just don't
Mm,
see that conversation so
yeah.
much out in the ether. At the end of the day, this is supposed to make us more money because
Hmm.
if you're in an agency business and in most professional services, you are selling time, even though you may not bill exactly like that, but like your time is everything. And opportunity cost is a huge part of running these types of businesses. Well,
Yeah.
AI can really help with that stuff, right? Like AI is a beautiful thing for opportunity cost in a way, because it means you don't have to spend time doing that. You could do this, you could do the higher stuff, you
Hmm.
can take the client out for dinner and wine and dine them, you can come up with brilliant strategies, you can do all these things that humans are good at that are theoretically high value. Again, it's too early for us, I think, but
Yeah.
that's the big question for me, and it's the one I haven't seen a whole ton of dialogue about around
Mhm.
this so far.
Well, I feel also like it might be fighting another trend. You know what I mean? Like no single trend is in a vacuum, of course. And so you sort of alluded to it earlier, sort of PR and the broader sort of struggles of the industry. There has been this trend that I actually talked about at Consensus this year. I was moderating a panel on media, which
Mhm.
also involved a lot in PR. And we talked about going direct, right? This is this thing that
Yeah,
certain companies think, oh, you know what? I don't need the media or PR. I can just talk on LinkedIn or whatever it is and do things like this, or I don't know.
yeah,
But I do feel like AI on some level, rightly or wrongly, is kind of fueling, helping, adding. It's not the source of that trend, but it's like making people think they can do a lot more on their own, because they technically can, right?
they
AI can do
definitely
a lot
can.
more. And
I mean, you
so,
you know
yeah,
how easy it is to make video content
yeah.
with this stuff, like
That was my last LinkedIn Live. It was just like,
right?
you can use AI and put yourself in videos and clone your voice and your likeness and have it write
Yeah,
the script for you. And even it's crazy what you can do
and
now.
like it's going to look accessible to most people. And a lot of folks are used to like that is 100 G's. That's what that was
Yeah.
going to cost you, or 50 G's, and it's inordinate amounts of time, and now that's gone. And again, are there problems with this content? Of course there are, but I think that indeed this notion of going directly, it's funny. I'm glad you brought it up because it's something we hear. We
Mhm.
also are hearing, and we have seen data on this, that trust in kind of third-party traditional media is eroding. So
Yeah.
for me, I've been in the game for 20 plus years. There was always that Nielsen survey, trust in advertising, and earned media coverage, which is sort of one of the bread and butter elements of PR, has always ranked very high. Well, now it seems that trust is eroding. And I think there's a few reasons for that. One is that I think there have been some high profile examples of egregious use of AI in journalism. It's been very reported. I think that a lot of outlets have had a very difficult time, and you know this better than I do. This is one of your bread and butter topics, I know.
Mm.
But I think the use of AI in journalism has, in some ways, eroded trust in it, and that has a massive impact for people thinking about PR strategy. It has, and I always get a little frustrated by this. There's an entire PR industrial complex that's like build owned media, build owned media. What they don't say is building owned media properties is really freaking hard. It's
Mm.
expensive, it's long. Producing quality content in a corporate context is very hard. But, is that the answer? Maybe it is. I don't know. But I do know we are seeing anecdotally and in data that trust in media is eroding. And I think that that's partly because there have been some really bad uses of AI, and the private equity guys are buying up these really legacy big name properties. Think of a Sports Illustrated, and they're just
Sure. Yeah.
trashing them with the AI,
Hmm.
trashing them.
Yeah, it's really you're touching on so many elements there. I could go deep on any of them, but I think that the high level takeaway for me is that AI lets you sort of cut to the finish line on content, but there's no shortcut to trust. Like
Right.
none. It doesn't, and in fact, if you are shortcutting to that finish line in bad ways, which we've seen certainly plenty of, it's even
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah.
So the trust, there's no substitute for being consistent, being quality, and having on some level a human connection there, some authenticity to
Yeah.
it, right? And that's another thing that AI struggles with. So for all the hype around the productivity, again, and it's not all hype. I mean, it is real. Like we were
It's
just
real.
talking about those videos, they can be very good quality with very minimal cost.
Yeah.
That human element is still so valuable
Yeah.
within that.
No, I totally agree.
So are there any use cases that you still sort of desire to use AI for, but haven't found a particularly good solution? I'm curious. I get us, I obviously talk to PR firms often and
Yeah.
do sessions. And one of the things you mentioned at the outset is sort of that media research layer. I feel like there's so many nuances of that. I remember one of the first things you had asked us about, which we didn't really honestly have a great solution for at the time, was list curation.
Yeah.
Which I know folks still spend time on. And I've got sort of more sophisticated ways of doing that, but I'll confess, I don't think I've mastered it. I feel like this is an opportunity for AI to help, and certainly now that AI search engines are getting, like Chat GPT just came out with its search yesterday.
Yeah.
I feel like that's an area, but is that still sort of an area you think that has some opportunity, and what are some others?
I think, look, I mean, I think that there's list curation is an interesting thing because, and it is an area that I think there's probably room for growth. Anybody in PR knows this, anybody listening knows this if they worked in the game. And you know this from your days at Mashable, I'm sure this happened to you. Like, one of the cardinal sins is I'm going to pitch the automotive guy on a headphone, right? Like, people are just like, yo, dude, you didn't take the, like, I'm doing cars over here, man.
Right.
And I think that that's such a cardinal sin that we've had some success with AI on this. I'm so paranoid about it that we're very adamant about people doing a check on AI generated lists, whether that's on the media or the influencer side or whatever. I mean, I think too, there's elements of PR these days, particularly kind of affiliate driven PR, where certain outlets, certain influencers need certain commission levels and stuff like that. We haven't really seen AI provide really good intel on that. Like, hey, you're going after, Jimmy the YouTuber, and like, don't bother him if you're not proposing a flat fee deal, or if you're not going to be able to give him a commission using an Amazon platform, because that's what he tends to want to use. He doesn't like linking to DTC sites. I'm maybe getting technical, but I feel like the PR people were listening. Like, we haven't had good intel on that side, on the affiliate PR side. And I think there's probably room to grow there. I mean, I think for me, certain things are probably going to remain in the human realm. Do I think that there could be more input on strategy? Yes, I do. I think that often when we talk about strategy and PR, we're just borrowing other ideas from other realms and porting them into a new realm. Like, I don't know if I've actually had that many original ideas in my entire existence. Like, I think if you can see patterns, or if you can see how something applies, but for me, there might be room to grow in terms of strategy development. Often what AI is going to pump out, as you well know, is kind of baseline stuff, which is fine in some realms, but not when you need originality. So there's room there. I mean, it's doing a pretty good job for me in terms of certain, as I said, certain ideation, certain research, certain reporting, and indeed certain kinds of writing. Could the writing get better? Sure. How's that going to happen? I don't exactly know.
Totally. There's always, like, particularly like that gap between, there are ways to tweak Chat GPT or even very purpose-built tools so that you get something closer to what you want, something personalized to you or your brand. There's always sort of more room there. I feel like with the reasoning, I think it should get better. There's OpenAI o1 and it stops and thinks, and if you couple that with some custom stuff, I think there's some potential, but I haven't seen it sort of productized yet.
One of the things you meant, just on that, I just want to add this because I think it's I've been struggling with it a lot in like the last 2 months. I find that one of the hardest things is to create content that is a fit with attention spans. And I think attention spans vary. I don't want to, like, it's kind of McLuhan-esque here, maybe a bit. Like, attention spans vary based on platform in some
True.
ways.
Yes.
And I don't, that's some great revelation, but I think that sometimes what we've seen with AI created content is that it doesn't really account for attention span and platform. And I know that you can prompt that. I understand that you can and should be prompting to that. But for me, that's something that we're like, I would like to see a bit more of that if it was possible to develop. Just more of an eye in the content creation towards, hey, this is the attention span we're probably dealing with. Like it's maybe longer or maybe it's absolutely short.
Yeah.
A little bit more tailoring towards that, I guess.
Well, and also showing the work, right? And that's
Yeah.
also part of like the reasoning. What I really like about things like ChatGPT o1 is like I did it this way because X or Y. I
Yeah.
thought, like if it's like, you're making a YouTube script or even content, it's like I cut it this way because, the attention span on YouTube tends to be longer as opposed to a TikTok where it's a lot
Yeah.
shorter. And like, on TikTok has this language of, you got to capture people in the first 2 seconds, so got to have
Have,
something punchy,
have
etc.
you
Like
played around with Cognosis, man?
I have not. No, what
This
is
is
that?
like it's
I
one of
feel like I should
these.
know it.
It's a workflow tool. I only just discovered
Cognosis.
it, and it's Cognosys. It's a
All right.
workflow tool. People say it has its limitations, like many of these things, particularly in terms of the volume of information it can pull from and the recency. As with many of these things, recencies are sometimes
Yeah.
an issue. But like it does this. It's a workflow tool that is very explicit about its reasoning, which I always find like that's helpful for me
Well, that's
because
another. Yeah, totally. You want the paper trail.
yeah.
Yeah. We only got a few minutes left here, but I wanted to let everyone watching know you can, if you want to comment on LinkedIn, I will see it. If you have a question for Jackson or just a question for either of us about anything what we're talking about, um, but I'm curious a little bit on like what has AI meant to you on the client side to some extent. Like what are clients' expectations now around what you're doing with AI, and has that altered sort of any way you approach clients and projects?
It is a wonderful question. I'm going to contextualize my answer by saying I run a technology PR firm.
Hmm.
So you would think, maybe, that my clients would be fairly advanced in their understanding, knowledge, familiarity with AI. I am so shocked at how few prospects, and I handled a lot of the sales for my agency, I should say that too. I am shocked at the number of prospects who never ask me anything about how we use AI, because it is an absolute. If you are if you're listening to this and you are a tech firm thinking about hiring a PR firm, ask about how they use AI. You do not want a PR firm that is ignorant, obviously, but you also want to understand what the checks and balances are on the output of AI. You want to understand if AI's output is factored into your billing model and the fees they are charging you, particularly if you're doing certain services that are very written heavy, narrative heavy services, content heavy services. So on the client side, what am I saying? I'm saying I'm very surprised at how few people ask us unprompted
Hmm.
about how we've integrated this, how it affects the work we produce for them. And I think that that's going to change. I mean, it's not that these companies are not sophisticated companies. Our clients are doing some very challenging things from an
Hmm.
engineering perspective, but I don't know why no one asks me about this, but they don't.
Interesting. That's really good. It's really good information. Good to know that it's not necessarily a thing they bring up.
Yeah.
Um, but I think to everything we've talked about, I think it's very important to be conversant in it. And I guess I would put that question to you because I feel like every story, like even more 10 times more than when we first spoke, like every story in the press is now an AI story to some extent, and
Yeah.
there are AI narratives that every story intersects with, like, particularly a tech PR firm.
Yeah.
You got a lot of things you're talking about use AI in some way. And then
They do.
those narratives around AI, whether it's something like ethics, whether it's something like energy cost or copyright, all of that, the story that you're trying to tell can be sort of hijacked into one of these narratives, right? And
It
so
can.
it's sort of important to be like conversant about what you're talking about.
Absolutely. I think the other thing, I agree with everything you said, that these things can quickly disrupt or start, disrupt the ship, if you will.
Hmm.
And what you thought you were going to see in terms of the media output can change. The other thing I would say is that, and I'm one of the guys who has to go to CES every year in Vegas, that
Our
particular
sympathies.
version of hell. I like seeing people there. It's always fun, but Vegas
Yeah,
and
yeah. It's
Vegas and me are not a great
we
mix.
you're gonna
Um,
get the CES cold or whatever, the flu.
well, exactly, like the plague. I've had it a few times.
Mm.
But one of the things we saw last year, and I know we're going to see it this year too, is everything's got a chat like a GPT wrapper on it, so that they can say, "Hey, my
Yeah.
barbecue's AI driven" or whatever. And I think that we saw two things on that are interesting. One's based on data. Citing that you have an AI driven barbecue actually erodes consumer trust in it. So citing AI doesn't necessarily do what I think some consumer tech companies think it will. The other thing is, I think on the media side, there's just become, I think rightly, a lot of cynicism about AI powered, AI driven, all of
Yeah.
that. I think people are kind of getting
The
sick
AI
of it.
washing. Totally.
Right. You know?
Yep. Something we all got to contend with.
Yeah.
Want to just leave on a forward-looking note, like as trends continue, as AI just becomes more embedded in everything that we're doing, where do you see it going for, both your firm and PR broadly in the next few years?
You know what I hope happens for our firm is that we see those efficiencies accrue in a bottom line context.
Hmm.
So that 55% of total revenue that we're spending on people, we can see that decline as a percentage. Will it? I don't know. But that's what I want to see. Would I like to see that get to 40 or 45? For sure I would. Um, I think in terms of how we're using it in our work, it's just going to become probably better at a range of functions that it's not that good at now. So we've identified a number on this chat here today. I think the other thing, and I say this to pretty much anybody, and I as I say, we do tech. I don't know what it's like to talk to a client from a more traditional industry, like say mining or something, how they think about AI. But I think you're gonna have to be ready to explain more to clients in a clear, cogent way how AI is used in the processes and what effects there are for them on that. Because I think the clients are going to become more savvy, candidly. And I think if you can't answer those questions in a good way, it's really going to hurt your sales. So having those answers actually matters to how you compete as a firm.
Sounds good. We'll leave it there with some really great advice for folks watching. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in for our chat here with Jackson. Jackson, do you want to leave anyone with a way to get in touch with you if they want to? Or
Yeah, for sure. We're at properpropaganda.net. I know that's actually a bit of a tongue twister to say, but the word propaganda.net. And I'm Jackson at properpropaganda.net. So yeah, ping me. I'm also on LinkedIn.
cool. And I've been Pete Paschal. I'm the minister of the media co-pilot. And but if you guys are interested, whoever's watching, in upgrading your experience with AI, please get in touch, and we can talk about maybe doing a session. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you.